So I have been reading a new book by Thomas Chamarro Pramuzic, and this book is called Don't Be Yourself. The subtitle of the book is Why Authenticity is Overrated and What to Do Instead.
Welcome. This is the Life Habits Podcast. My name is Carl Vredenberg. It is the podcast where science meets the messy reality of life. So we explore evidence-based research on a regular basis in our respective areas of specialization. We read books, we read journal articles, and publications, and then we bring the insights that we have synthesized from all of that research to you in this podcast to apply them to your work, your health, and your life. And we are starting with Suzanne.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. So I have been reading a new book by Thomas Chamarro Pramuzic, and this book is called Don't Be Yourself. I was walking through the library, I saw it on the new release display, and I thought, don't be yourself. The subtitle of the book is Why Authenticity is Overrated and What to Do Instead. It's published by the Harvard Business Review Press, which is kind of interesting as well. And I did a little search on the Harvard Business Review site, and when you put in authenticity, there are over 4,000 hits of articles and suggestions and case studies. So they, like many, have been talking about authenticity, especially in the workplace, for a long time. So I was really curious about this book. I want to read a little passage from the book to give you a sense of just how it started. So this is from the intro. And Thomas, and it says, few psychological traits are more frequently touted as desirable, moral, and socially advantageous than authenticity. Millions of blogs, books, articles dedicated to its benefits. We appear to have turned pure, unfiltered personal expression into an ultimate life hack. A moral and noble goal in itself with no regard for what truly drives effective interpersonal functioning in any meaningful interactions. So I think authenticity, what was initially supposed to free people from the pressures of conformity in the workplace especially, is, in his research, backfiring in many surprising ways. So we've been told a story about authenticity being a career superpower. You know, you can hear in your mind the taglines, be yourself, bring your whole self to work, don't worry about what other people think. But Chamarro Pramuzic, he argues that despite this kind of pervasive mantra, evidence is suggesting otherwise. Success in the workplace is not about being your raw, unfiltered self, but instead about curating a professional version of yourself that is more in alignment with the expectations, the group norms, the organizational goals. So if you're like me, I saw the intro, I read the back cover, and I thought, okay, so is he suggesting we should be fake? And he's not. He's not saying that. It's about the ability to balance self-awareness with strategic self-presentation. So to be who you are, of course, requires knowing who you are. When you look at research around self-awareness, Tanya Urich, she did a TED Talk a number of years ago that I showed to my students when I talked to them about self-awareness. And some of her research has showed that 95% of the population think they're self-aware, but in actuality, that number is only 10 to 15% are actually self-aware. So to be authentic in the first place requires you knowing yourself. And so maybe we have a disconnect there as well. So when I've been thinking about the book and trying to kind of put it in application, when I know of myself, I can be intense sometimes. I'm energetic. I can also be impatient when I'm, focused on something. That's self-awareness, so that's good. But do I authentically want to be that in every single interaction or meeting that I'm in? Do I want to let my impatience show? Of course not. I make strategic decisions about when to dial it up, when to dial it down. Is that being inauthentic, or is that being professional? The book also gets really interesting in the later parts, where it makes the point that while we generally think that it's better to interact with genuine versions of other people rather than fake versions, we would actually much rather prefer interacting with kind, polite, socially skilled versions of people rather than perhaps their authentic selves that are more self-centered or focused on their own interests, objectives, and values. So that was kind of an interesting way to reposition it. I found the book quite compelling in a way I didn't expect it would be. And so the argument there is people don't actually want your raw, unfiltered authenticity. They want someone who's considerate and someone who is thoughtful about their impact on others.
I'd like to just take a couple of minutes out of the episode to honestly thank you for watching our episode now on YouTube. And also if you're listening to this on audio podcasts as well. I've been doing this for 18 years and I still love doing it. And I love getting together with Mandy and MJ and Suzanne, preparing material for this and the like. I wanted to also just ask you, though, if you really enjoy what we're doing, to subscribe to this podcast, also to like it, and also to provide us some feedback, some comments. Over the years, I've also had people comment that things that they liked, the things that they disagreed with. It's really been a community, and that's really the special part about it, is the overall community, the bi-directional communication as well. So I'd like to, again, thank you. Please connect with us, and back to the episode.
I think also one of the neat takeaways was a linkage around reputation over identity. So it's mostly others, not you, who assign meaning to your actions and personality. So, if we think about that, you can have all kinds of intentions, all kinds of self-perceptions, all kinds of stories that you hold about who you are. But what actually matters in the world, and especially in kind of workplaces, is how others are experiencing you. So he frames this in the book as an opportunity to sculpt and shape who you are and your reputation. And it's about also achieving harmony between self-expression and the connections that you're trying to build. I want to also pause and acknowledge something important, and he does have a chapter related to this. The ability to show up authentically in a workplace setting without consequence is itself a privilege. So this is something that is far more available to those in the dominant cultural group within a society or workplace. And for many navigating workplaces where they're already outside of the non-dominant group, self-presentation often isn't optional. It's survival. And so when we talk about managing how we're perceived, we have to recognize the inequalities at play. And I think a lot has been written about authenticity in that way. So what does this mean for us? What can you do with this sort of on Monday morning to think about your authenticity and how maybe you don't want to be yourself in some cases? Okay, so a few things. First, catch yourself using "I'm just being authentic" as a shield. So the next time you say, or you find yourself internally saying, "Hey, I'm just being myself. This is who I am," pause and ask, am I defending something that's holding me back? Is this authenticity, or is it an inability on my part to adapt, or maybe to make an effort or to consider impact? So as a first step, just notice it. You don't have to change anything just yet. Just become aware of if you're using authenticity as a justification. Second, ask someone you trust how they experience you. And this is something I suggest when people are working on self-awareness, is you have to get external views to this. So pick a person, a colleague, a friend, someone who will be honest with you, and ask them, When I'm at my best, what qualities do I show? When I'm not at my best, what happens? Listen, don't defend, don't explain. Again, just trying to gather this input. And then third, pick one interaction this week where you're going to try to harmonize instead of focusing on self-expression. So maybe it's a meeting where you normally dominate the conversation. Try asking more questions instead. Maybe it's a situation where normally you'd be brutally honest. Try being a little less out there, maybe a little kinder instead. So trying to recognize in a moment where you're centering your own needs and instead try to prioritize the collective good or the development of that relationships. So see what happens. Notice if the effort to adapt creates better outcomes than insisting on being understood in your own terms. And I think this is about, an effort to look around. The leaders that you respect, are they kind? Are they considerate? Are they socially skilled? Even if it doesn't come naturally, I don't think that's inauthenticity. I think actually it's the most authentic thing you can do. And it's in service and in care for others. So I've been thinking a lot about authenticity since reading this book. In a way, I thought I had authenticity figured out previously. It's been a really interesting read.
I think it's fascinating. I think it's an absolutely amazing topic. Two quick thoughts. One is, what for people who already are kind and are, because I'm actually thinking there's probably a continuum of the way people work and are today, right? And people that are, because I'm going to be talking a little later about dark personalities. Psychopathy, for example. Psychopaths are amazing at self-presentation. They come across really kind, right? They don't give anything about you. But so I'm thinking, is it the case that on the far end of the spectrum, where people are just the opposite of what you'd want, they'd want to not be authentic. They'd want to do, self-presentation, right? Whereas some other people who are authentically good people may well still want to be authentic because they don't need to, have a different point of view. But I also just wanted to capture what you said about the dominant sort of culture. So I worked with a bunch of Black designers in our racial equity group when I was at IBM, and this notion that they'd always be the only one in the room. At a lot of the time, it's the same thing for women, and that what they'd have to do is talk like the rest of the people in the room, whereas we actually encouraged groups of Black designers on their own just to speak the way they normally would. For example, it was totally different, but it fed into them being able to show up with themselves the way they actually are. And then I'm reminded of women who are podcasters, for example, or news readers needing to sort of adopt a lower voice to sound more like men, right? To sound more, authoritative. That again, it's trying to, really sort of mold the way that you actually, appear and show up and the like. And so what are your thoughts, Suzanne, about that notion of if there's a continuum of good people versus not so good people, the book is more relevant maybe to the people that are not naturally, authentically good?
Yeah, those are all really great points. I see this book as an entryway into a broader dialogue around, let's not just take it as gospel that, the ideal should be to be as authentic as one can be, and to consider the needs of others. I think in a diversity and inclusion context, and again, he has a chapter related to that, there's a lot of nuance there and difference. And in the ideal, everyone would have equitable and equal opportunity to make those choices about what aspects they're bringing of themselves. But the takeaway that I've had from the book is not choosing yourself in all instances, and not about self-expression in all cases, but rather about how can I strengthen relationships by not centering on myself necessarily.
I think it's a great conversation, as it always is. And I thank you for being part of this. Those of you who are listening and watching, I hope you learned something. And We hope that you will take the advice that we've provided. We each time try to give advice for you to try with regard to the things that we talked about in the next day, in the next week. And we hope that you will improve your life, your work, and your health as well. That's it for this episode. Talk to you all later. Bye for now.